I learned a lot from my first term studying at Oxford, and not just about my subject. Let's talk about how it all went. My name is Sam, and this is Oxcentric. A bit about me before we get started. I am currently reading engineering at University College, which is the oldest college in the University of Oxford. And no, Balliol and Merton, you're not the oldest. You're wrong. Both of these things will influence my perspectives. Studying a STEM subject compared to, say, a humanities subject at Oxford can be extremely different, and also life can vary somewhat from college to college. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on my initial reactions to living and studying in Oxford, especially under social distancing measures. I'm hoping this video might be interesting for people to hear what it was like transitioning from a pretty much average state school background to a world-leading university like Oxford. Whilst I think my first term has overall been a very positive experience, I want to give you an honest perspective of what life is like at Oxford. For this reason, I'm breaking the video up into 3 main sections: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Stick around to the end where I'll tell you what my tutors said about me in their end of term reports. Without further ado, let's go. Part 1, the good. These are the things I've loved about Oxford and what makes it a fantastic place to study. First things first, Oxford is beautiful. This is without a doubt the prettiest place I have ever lived. From the amazing architecture to the stunning sunrises, there is no part of this city that is not perfectly photogenic. I'm very lucky to have such a well-located room, and it is truly fantastic that I can wake up in the morning and have beautiful views out into my college, and then when I take a break from my studies and look out the other windows, I get views across the high street and of a different college. It's such an invigorating environment to be in, and I will never get used to the fact that I walk past the Radcliffe Camera, this beautiful library that is an icon for Oxford, every time I come back from my grocery shop. As well as being absolutely beautiful, the city of Oxford has a lot to see and do, and I think it's a very good place to live as a student. I particularly like the nice array of restaurants, even if so far I've mostly just visited pizza places. Not there's a problem with that, everybody loves some pizza. This term I've got a lot of use out of the green spaces in Oxford like Christchurch Meadow, which are ideal for going on socially distanced walks when you just need some social time. Oxford has been in the news a bit recently due to the announcement of the coronavirus vaccine, and I got to see some filming going on for various news reports for that, which I just thought was kind of cool. The next thing I thought was good about this term was my room. It is massive. There is so much storage space. I genuinely do not know what to do with all the storage space. It's fantastic. And it's also absolutely beautiful, and it's in the historic part of the college like I was hoping for. Genuinely could not have asked for a better room. It can get a little bit cold, but mostly I just turn the heating up, and that is a very minor complaint. The next good thing I want to talk about is jumping back to the start of term, and that is matriculation. Matriculation is the ceremony by which you officially become a member of Oxford University. However, nowadays it's primarily a chance to get dressed up in your gowns and take some cute pictures. It is also an excuse for students to go and drink copious amounts of wine before 11 AM in the morning, which may also perhaps be part of the appeal. Admittedly, I did miss out on going punting like a lot of my friends did, but you know, I have plenty of time left in Oxford, I'm sure I'll get round to it.
Where did you get your ride? Oh, from Magdalen.
Matriculation dinner was also a great first taste of what formal hall is going to be like when it does return. This was a lovely 3-course meal, and it was again another opportunity to get dressed up and just have some fun. I also did the grace, which was quite interesting seeing as I do not speak Latin. The most I interact with Latin is an occasional bit in singing. So ultimately I learned the grace and spoke it to a hall full of people, which was quite a memorable experience and certainly quintessentially Oxford. The next good thing about Oxford is that you are never bored. There is always something going on, whether it is work or whether it is leisure. If you are someone who likes structure and likes to always feel like you are doing something, then you would probably really enjoy a STEM course here at Oxford. On a similar note of teaching, another thing I found quite good and rewarding about my first term here was the format of tutorials. So this is a very specific thing about how Oxford teaches, which is where one tutor and a very small group, usually just 2 students, will sit and talk about the subject. In most of my tutorials I'll be looking through a problem sheet, so that's a set of questions you get given the week before and have to answer. You do get better at thinking on the spot by working in tutorials, however primarily I'd say they're about understanding concepts thoroughly. Some topics work better for tutorials than others, but I'd say they're one of the most useful parts of my course. The next good thing has been my course mates. My college is one of the larger ones for engineering, and I've really enjoyed working with people who are as passionate about the subject as I am. Usually when we're stuck, we'll work together on problems, and that saves a lot of unnecessary time and effort. I think we formed quite a tight-knit group, and I hope the rest of them would agree with that too. Choir was one of the most rewarding things I did this term. I got to sing lots of cool music and look at areas that I'd never looked at before, which was interesting, albeit quite challenging at times. It was lovely to be able to sing in person again, even if we couldn't have an audience in to watch us. The social element and of course the free food has also been equally important to my choir experience, and one of my absolute highlights of the entire term was when the choir brought some festive cheer to a normal night in hall by doing the 12 Days of Christmas. So that has been the good. Those are some of the fantastic things that have been happening this term. But what about the bad? Part 2, the bad. So these are some of the things in Oxford life that are slightly problematic for me, but they're entirely bearable. The first thing I would put in this category is the workload. Now, I knew what I was getting myself into here. Oxford is not easy, nor is it intended to be. However, you can know that the work is going to be hard, but when you actually get here and get started, it is still quite a shock. I found that the Oxford workload was manageable, but it was a 7-day-a-week commitment and you had to be very efficient with your time to get everything done. There were sometimes days where I worked from 9 AM until 10 PM with basically no substantial breaks outside of meal times. Thankfully these days were in the minority, but they did need to happen for me to get through all my work. This especially came as a shock because for the last 6 months, between finishing my A-levels in April and starting at Oxford in October, I had just been working on my own deadlines, so having external deadlines and problem sheets due every week was something that was very different and required me to adjust quite quickly. The next thing I would class as bad here at Oxford is the 8-week terms. Now you might be watching this and wondering why is it so bad, especially when it means that we get cheaper rent and a few other things like that. However, I found that by the end of the term I was just really burnt out, and I think if the terms were longer and we had to do the same amount of work over a slightly longer time, I would finish the term in a lot better state. This term I only really managed to stay on top of my work because when I was in self-isolation I just worked all day every day because I had nothing better to do really. What I think would really help Oxford for a course like mine would be if in the middle of our 8-week terms we had one reading week where you're able to go over your notes, refresh yourself on the material that you've covered and basically recenter before an equally intense 4-week sprint at the end. The last thing relating to my course that I'm going to put in this category is virtual labs. Now let me disclaim this by saying some of my virtual labs were entirely fine and I even found 1 or 2 of them quite fun. The computing labs where we were working on coding, that's something I quite enjoy, and that was not at all affected by the fact I was doing it in my room instead of in a computer laboratory. However, the electrical and mechanical labs, which involve experiments that don't move online particularly easily, were not quite as good, and I would have enjoyed them a lot more if they had been in person. I also found there were instances where I would struggle with something and get stuck for a pretty unreasonable amount of time, which would lead to me getting more stressed and subsequently worsening my enjoyment of the lab. The last thing I'd like to talk about is union hacking. Now, in Oxford, there is a students' union and there is also the Oxford Union, which is an entirely separate thing and is mostly known for hosting debates and famous speakers. The Oxford Union also has its own internal politics, which leads to elections for roles such as president and treasurer. These roles do attract a lot of aspiring politicians. For example, you may know that Boris Johnson was the president of the Oxford Union when he was there back in the 80s. And we all know how that one ended up. Union hacking is when people running for something in the union message basically everyone that they know on social media and ask them to vote for them. I think this just makes me feel like any interactions I have with people involved in the union are kind of cheapened, because I don't know if they're being nice to me because they genuinely think I'm someone worth being nice to, or just because they're after my vote. I know it's politics, but I just don't particularly like it. So that's my minor quibbles over and done with. Let's talk about the really ugly stuff. Part 3, the ugly. The ugly is the things that really caused me stress this term and I just want to avoid going forward. Probably my biggest frustrations this term have related to my household situation. Initially I was allocated a household of 1, then I moved into a household of about 11, and then I moved back to my household of 1. I initially joined a larger household because I was worried that being on my own would leave me isolated. I ended up leaving the larger household primarily because I just didn't see them. They were living in one place, I was living in a different one, and it just wasn't the most convenient arrangement. However, when someone in that household got COVID and I was put into self-isolation due to someone I'd never met on a staircase I didn't live on, it was absolutely gutting for me. Unfortunately, I only started the process of formally moving household once someone had gone and got tested, and really, that was too late. After I chose to move back to a single household, I felt secure knowing that I had no more risk of being put into self-isolation. However, it was quite sad looking on other people's social media and seeing them doing fun things like Christmas dinners, which I just couldn't be part of. Got the whole household together for an Christmas dinner, got the Mariah on, all good Christmas vibes here. Well. And on a related note, the other thing I would put in this category was my period of self-isolation. Self-isolation put a massive strain on my mental health. For the second half, I basically just switched off my emotions and just worked. I am still proud of the fact that I managed to film the day in the life video during this time, because for the rest of the time, I just had no energy to do anything other than my problem sheets. Being unable to see my parents when they had travelled all the 3 hours down from home to Oxford to see me and my brother was just really upsetting and the worst I have felt in years, to be honest. Right, so that's the negative stuff over and done with. Let's talk about my reports. Part 4, reports. This term I got written feedback from 2 out of 3 of my tutors, and the last one gave me verbal feedback in a virtual meeting. I'm only going to read out the 2 where I got the written feedback, just so you guys can hear it in their own exact words. Sam is a very enthusiastic, intelligent student who is very keen to contribute to tutorials. He should now spend some of the vacation ensuring that he fully understands all the topics that he has studied this term. He should then obtain an excellent collection result. I was very happy with this one, short but sweet. By the way, collections are informal exams that colleges run at the start of terms, and they don't count towards anything official, but they do serve to check whether you are making the progress that you would be expected to be making. And here's the second one. Sam is an enthusiastic student who is very quick to answer questions in tutorials. His tutorial work is of a very good standard, and he responds well to guidance. Generally, I would recommend that he thinks a bit more deeply about the ideas and techniques introduced in the course, rather than simply focus on getting the answer at the back of the tutorial sheet. I think this criticism is entirely fair. Sometimes I do focus mostly on getting the right answers, especially when I have a lot to do. So, despite some hiccups, I'm very happy with my academic performance this term. Part 5, conclusion. So, that's my first term in review. Despite the few negatives, I'm very excited to get back to Oxford next term, though I still have plenty of work to do over the holidays. Thank you all so much for your continued support, and thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers, our first big channel milestone. Stay tuned, and happy studying. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content. This took so long to film that it was light when I started filming, and it is now pitch black outside.